It's a picture with Churchill on the one hand and Gandhi on the other. Mm-hmm. And basically, Gandhi said that to give millions of people a knowledge of English is slavery. He was trying to ensure that education served the interest of the masses. And I'm sure we would agree that this is desirable. It should be initially in a local Indian language, and then you can add other languages to your repertoire. Churchill, on the other hand, is also photographed there with a gun. And Churchill, in 1943, was given an honorary doctorate at the University of Harvard, when, of course, it was a question of getting the Americans on board in a very active way in the Second World War. And the speech is a lot about that, but also in that, he and Roosevelt had agreed on a strategy for promoting English as a world language as soon as peace was restored, partly through United Nations, partly through the International Monetary Fund and all those other bodies. And this means that basically the expansion of English since 1945 has been government policy for the United Kingdom and the United States, that they should maintain the value of their investments when decolonization took place. They should socialize elites in colonies to use English continuously, irrespective of the consequences for the other languages in, say, Nigeria, Pakistan, and so on. And to this extent, I think that it's very legitimate to call what has happened in terms of the way English has been promoted to serve Western interests since 1945 is a form of linguistic imperialism. And you can find many definitions of imperialism that this would fit with completely well. Just the same as there was a lot of research on cultural imperialism for several decades. It's out of fashion now for some reason. But I think that all the evidence of what happened, say for instance, when the Iron Curtain was wound down in the post-communist world, what was preached in the post-communist countries, it was the free market economy, it was human rights, and it was the English language, which has taken over as the main lingua franca in many contexts in those countries. And this very definitely is something where the debate about how far change of language changes people's ways of thinking is very much something which is where British and American interests connected to the promotion of English, and is a huge industry in those countries, are very concerned that they should maintain the profitable investment that there is in English learning, which you mentioned actually, the fact that it's big business, and that this is very likely to serve elite interests worldwide, at least, as we know, in the present state of globalization, neoliberalism. And the implications for other languages are that they have to really articulate very active strategies, like in the Nordic countries, in academia, in order to maintain the privileges that they have acquired in those languages until that point.
Okay. So this was Robert's elucidation.
Again, it has a two-faced point. I agree that especially the British Council is sort of trying to sell as much English as it can. But on the other hand, it finds eager, avid buyers, because English almost everywhere in the world is a ticket to social and economic advancement, and what is maybe even more important, it is the way to a certain cultural, intellectual liberation. I mean, Sue Wright mentioned it in passing. For many, many people, English, or say the state language in their village, the next language up is a way to break the bonds of tradition, of patriarchy, of local oppression, and to become part of a bigger, larger, freer world. That goes for state languages, while at the same time, I agree, there is an oppressive side to it. And at the same time, it may go at the expense of small languages becoming low prestige, being neglected. But it is always a double history, and maybe emancipation always is. And English is, and has been in the past century, an instrument of emancipation, liberation, economic advancement, and also, in many respects, loss of traditions, loss of local custom, local beliefs. One thing which is rarely mentioned in this context, loss of unwritten and uninstitutionalized religion. We never talk about that. But the main motor behind the movement for the protection of threatened languages is the Southern Institute of Languages, which is an evangelical mission institute. Missionaries everywhere were always very eager to learn the local language in order to destroy the local customs and in order to destroy the local religion. Again, it's double-faced. I wish it were different, but it's double-faced. And English as an instrument of wider communication is also an instrument of liberation.
I agree with 95% of what you just said. Any language can serve good purposes or bad purposes, noble purposes or foul purposes.
And often the noble purpose is the bad purpose at the same time. We live in a complicated world.
The point that I would insist on, especially in relation to the post-colonial world, but also even in places like Japan, Korea, and China, is that while English, as you rightly say, opens doors, it does close them for others. And especially in the colonial world, this has very much been the case because of the misuse of English as the main medium of instruction in schools. Even in Tanzania, which has this unifying Swahili, in addition to hundreds or over 100 national local languages, there was never agreement at the secondary level of schooling that there should be a maintenance of Swahili, so there's been a shift into English.